Welcome to National Arts. I'm Mike Baker. Our guests this evening include Larry Snitzler, a protege of the late Andre Segovia and one of the finest classical guitarists in America today. Tonight we'll also meet Lily Spandorf, a fine painter whose works have graced the collections of Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, Pat Nixon, and a host of international dignitaries. But it's actually Lily's work with bygone scenes in Washington, D.C. that have brought her national attention. Lily talks fondly of Washington Nevermore, the collection currently on exhibit at the National Museum of Women in the Arts.
It grew over many years, and first I got the idea when I suddenly realized that an attractive corner or building that I had painted and exhibited and sold the painting at the gallery, and I would walk by and it was suddenly gone. So by and by I realized that I should not sell these particular paintings one by one, and I started collecting them. So over the years, it became a great number of paintings that I kept together. And suddenly I met Mr. Griffin by chance. I was painting on 11th Street between G and H, and he walked by and started talking and looking and asked if I had many different ones. I said yes. So finally he came up, and over a couple of years we were talking and thinking about things, and finally he came up that he would want the whole collection, and he published a book and arranged for this exhibition and had a movie made.
Lily, you studied in Vienna as well as in London. You've painted scenes from all over the world, and you have a certain old world mysticism in your pieces. I've noticed that in the pieces that you painted about the New World or about Washington and here in the United States.
Well, I think that's rather nicely put. I didn't realize, I didn't think about mysticism. I tried to capture the atmosphere of each individual place, country or city. And if I succeed in that, I think that's pretty important. The mysticism might stem from the Baroque tendency of Austrian art and influence, where I grew up and studied.
Can you tell me a little bit about your technique and the paints that you use?
I use a mixture of opaque and transparent watercolors. The opaque is gouache and the transparent is aquarelle. And I use them alternative and together and with line and brush and pen. I don't stick absolutely to one medium, but mostly the water soluble, because I like to work outdoors. All of these were done right on the spot. I feel I get much more feeling and the impact of the mood and the place into it. So I work with water-soluble media because that's I can handle it better outdoors.
President Johnson, Vice President Hubert Humphrey, First Lady Pat Nixon, they all have pieces of your work, and one currently hangs in the White House. That's quite an honor.
Yes, it is. And many permanent collections, and many people, private people own my paintings all over the country and in different countries. President Johnson presented several of my paintings to visiting guests like Princess Margaret and the President of Korea and the President of Iceland and the once President of Italy, Antonio Segni, whom I first met in Sardinia when I was traveling and exhibiting there as guest of the tourist ministry. He bought several of my paintings, and then when he was visiting here in Washington, was presented with 2 of them.
You are one of only 2 women that have been honored by the National Press Club. Helen Thomas is the other. That's a great honor as well.
So I was told. I'm not sure, but I think so. And that was indeed a great honor.
And Oscar-winning film director Bar Wiseman has done a documentary about your work.
Yes, everybody admires it very much. It's been shown 3 times on public television and a number of times here at the museum, also at the press club, at that tribute to Lily Spandorf reception they gave, which was great.
Lily also remembers her travels abroad and the many scenes she's painted and shared with friends around the world. Each one has a special memory and a story or 2 connected with it.
Salzburg, the Residenzplatz with the Glockenspiel, that's in front of the Archbishop's residence.
And it's lovely the way you have the afternoon sun almost casting some sunshine on that part of the plaza. That's beautiful. Rome.
Trastevere, which is a very popular part of the city, looking over to the Capitol.
This is a little more impressionistic than the first 2 that we've seen.
Well, they all are really.
Yeah.
Some have a little more detail than others.
There are a lot of earthen tones in this one.
Well, that's the color of Rome,
Yes.
the ochres.
And is this Salzburg once again?
Salzburg, that's the panorama of most of the important buildings.
There's a definite timelessness about them, as if they will go on forever.
Oh, yes. The castle and the dome. This is in Nepal, the temple of Shiva. They were celebrating the birthday of Shiva, and that was part of the trip which started in Russia, in Leningrad, Moscow, going on to India, Nepal, and Beirut.
You've been all over the world. This is Yugoslavia.
Yes, in Slovenia, which is beautiful, beautiful country.
Now, you're noted for finding the out-of-the-way beaten path.
I try
that people use all the time, but they never notice the scene.
That's what a lot of people find, that I make them see the city or the country with different eyes.
Ah, this is interesting. Tell me about her.
I call her La Bella Sarda. In Sardinia, where I traveled extensively, they have their own national dress in each village that they're very beautiful.
The native costumes are indeed gorgeous as you travel the world. This looks like Rio de Janeiro. Is this nighttime?
I painted almost half the night through, and they sent a special cable car up there to get me down from the Sugarloaf.
And you captured the cross, of course, at the top of the mountain, which is part of the scene.
This is Cambridge in England. Also, almost a night scene I caught just before running back to catch a train back to London.
The blacks and browns, especially the blacks, give it a real formality, almost an institutional look, which really, the regality of the whole thing is indeed kind of institutional, isn't it?
Well, it is, yes. It's
well now, this looks like the space shuttle.
It is. That's the night before the launch, which for me was the most exciting moment, when it's all lighted up and the bird, as they call the shuttle, is on the launch pad. And I managed to catch this exciting scene. I was part of a team of artists which they select very carefully to send there and do some painting of the launches and around the Space Center.
Well, you know, the nice thing that you've done with this, as you look at that scene, the lights drop off severely after you actually get out of the launch pad, and you've given it that beautiful, almost mysticism that surrounds that whole effort.
That's the way it struck me, and I'm glad you find that I captured it.
Is this old Rome?
This is my favorite old Rome. La Via dei Coronar, a way out little place that I discovered.
Now, it's no longer an out-of-the-way place because you've painted it. And now it's being seen by everyone.
Immortalized.
Yes. The little market the little farmer's market. Actually, that looks like a family market there that might be run by just one family.
Just a little stall there, the one woman selling fruit and vegetables.
And the men there probably talking politics, as they want to do.
Probably, and there's a well where they get the water from.
Oh, isn't that neat? Oh, okay, so we have a little bit of foreign flavor here. Tell me about this.
Back to the fabulous trip, Luxor in Egypt. And I went across the river on the native ferry so that I could catch all the activity.
Well, now everybody knows Westminster.
Yes, it's not an unknown scene, but I did get it from a different angle.
I think it's lovely. And the impressionistic view of it is really nice. And especially if you think in terms of the fog and how that has a tendency to take all the angles off a lot of the buildings, if you think about it.
Well, London isn't always in fog, you know. It has its good moments.
Now, I know you like to do some things with nature.
Yes, this is at Coolfont, near Berkeley Springs, a lovely resort. And Sam, the owner, grew these sunflowers, which captivated me.
Wherever you go, it seems as if you'll paint night and day until
Just
you're almost
about.
exhausted.
Just about.
Or until you can't find anything else to paint. And flowers, I guess, are one example of that.
I don't do too many flowers, but this is the most
one at night.
spectacular one. It's a night blooming cereus, and friends of mine have it growing in their driveway, a huge plant. Now it's much bigger than it was when I painted this. And I sit all night in their driveway. They have a light out for me, and I paint.
The focus is wonderful here.
This bloom opens in front of your eyes, and by the morning it's gone.
It's beautiful. Well, we have a market scene here.
This is the famous Les Halles in Paris, which doesn't exist anymore. So that's also a no more, never more Paris. Did we do
now
that?
this is a little different from the other paintings.
Well, this is one of a small series I did in a very dilapidated slum quarter of Palermo. Danilo Dolci, a famous Sicilian author, wrote a book about it. And I was very fascinated with it. They had a contest, Painters to the Cortile. And then they do a lot of things like that in Italy. And then they had an exhibition. Well, the other painters did one painting, and that was it. And I went back a lot of times because the activity there and the life going on was just incredible.
Now, our last one here is rather unusual because I noticed that your figures are a little more rounded as opposed to some of your other lifelike subjects that are more angular. The nature of the figures makes it a little more accessible and less formal in a way, which makes it nice.
Good, I'm glad you like it.
A number of years ago, Larry Snitzler happened across a recording by Andre Segovia. He was so taken with its beauty that the very next day, he began studying the instrument.
When I heard that recording, I suddenly realized that the guitar could have a beautiful sound like the cello. And I had started, my first musical instrument was the cello. And I heard Segovia produce these beautiful, beautiful sounds, even through the record. Some ineffable quality of his wonderful, lovely personality came through, and that was enough to alter the course of my life, really.
And it was 3 years later when Segovia invited you to participate in a master class.
Yes, that was absolutely extraordinary. I was very fortunate to be living in Washington at the time, and I studied with Sophocles Pappas. Pappas was a close friend of Segovia's, had been for many, many years. And one time when Segovia came to play in Washington, Pappas invited him to his guitar studio and had a few of us play for Segovia. And on that occasion, after I played for Segovia, he invited me to come and study with him in Siena, Italy that summer. I was ecstatic, and I literally ran all the way from Pappas's guitar shop to my home to ask my parents if I could go to study in Italy that summer with Segovia.
Paris, France also played a pretty big part in your education.
Absolutely. I lived in France for many, many years, and came really to be bicultural, bilingual. France had a very great influence on my development. And I had a great privilege, in addition to having studied with André Segovia, I was able to study with Nadia Boulanger, who was one of the great figures in the music of the 20th century. Teacher of composition, of analysis, musical analysis, theory. She was an extraordinary figure, an extraordinary person to have worked with.
You studied with others as well.
Yes, I studied with Ida Presti and Alexander Lagoya, who really represent perhaps the greatest guitar duo in the history of the instrument. And I was very fortunate to have studied with them in Nice, France, and to have continued my friendship with them afterward in Paris.
Federico Moreno Torroba was actually one of the first composers inspired by Segovia to compose for him. I know that you do some of his works.
I was privileged to have met Moreno Torroba in Madrid. And the man was absolutely extraordinary. At the time that I met him, he was in his mid to late 80s. And he came into the room with this tremendous dynamic energy. He was an extraordinary person. And I got a sense of what it was that had propelled him through all of these decades of writing and writing. And at the time I met him, he was in charge, he was the president of the Spanish Society of Authors and Composers. And that was a full-time job, but in addition to that, he wrote and traveled all over the world at that time to supervise recordings of his music. But he and Segovia were very close friends from a very early age, when Segovia was barely known and first arrived in Madrid. And Torroba wrote for Segovia. He was the first one to write, and he was very proud of that fact, as he had every right to be. And he wrote this suite castellana. And the first of pieces, the opening piece, is called a fandanguillo, which is inspired by the flamenco music, by the music of Andalusia, which was the region of the southern region of Spain where Segovia was from. And this was atypical for Torroba because he was from Castile, the region around Madrid. And the music of Castile reflects the climate, which is in a higher altitude, and the music is cooler and not so fiery as the fandanguillo, but in honor of Segovia, he wrote this fandanguillo to begin with.
The fandanguillo is more fiery, and yet the second movement is more contemplative.
Yes, it's just the contrary, as is typical besides suites of three movements, an opening rapid movement and contemplative, and then a more rapid movement to close. But this particular piece has the name arada, which refers to plowing. And this was always a source of some confusion to me. I didn't understand how this beautiful lyrical piece could relate to plowing, which seemed like such a hard physical labor. But my wife, who was from Chile, explained to me one time that it recalled for her memories from childhood when, in the early morning, in the countryside, at a distance, you could see occasionally men plowing in the countryside, in the fields, with a horse and a metal plow, you know? And at a distance, there was a great serenity and a beauty at that time. And that obviously is what Torroba had in mind, Moreno Torroba had in mind in this piece, to evoke that feeling.
You're a member of the Washington Guitar Quintet, which in the not-too-distant future will be going on tour in New England. And of course, one of the members of that quintet is the famous Charlie Byrd.
That's right. Charlie Byrd, John Marlowe, Jeffrey Myrick, Myrna Sislin, and myself. We've all known each other for years and been good friends, and we formed the quintet just a couple of years ago, and our motto is staccatos to tangos, and we cover the waterfront as far as our repertoire. We cover everything from jazz to tangos to classical pieces, Vivaldi. We have a great time playing together, and audiences seem to enjoy us as well, so we'll be going to New England in October.
Thank you for being with us. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so be a part of it. Good night.